I think there's very little question that the face of Canada is changing, and it's changing rapidly. And certainly our government makes a point of saying that all the time. And I think this goes back to last week where there was commentary that it was institutional racism to give people time off at Christmas because there's so many other religions that don't get time off. So it's clear that things are changing, and they're changing very quickly in Canada. What we're going to look at today on Don't Talk TV is maybe something controversial, maybe something you're not supposed to notice, but we're going to look at it anyway because a viewer brought this up to me and I thought it was interesting to consider. Does the rapidity with which Canadian culture is changing and the policies of the government to make that happen, do they rise to the level of a different kind of cultural genocide or an ethnic cleansing? And I say different with reference to the cultural genocide we've seen in the past of First Nations people. Hello, my name's Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. This video might be considered very controversial by some. We'll be talking about some things that sometimes it seems like you're not allowed to notice, you're not allowed to talk about it, although the people who are very happy about the changing face of Canada, they're allowed to talk about it. Today, in Don't Talk TV, we're not looking at whether it's good or bad, it's just the facts. That's what we're all about at Don't Talk TV. And as I said in the preamble, a viewer had suggested to me that he thought that it rises to the level of ethnic cleansing or maybe a cultural genocide the way Canada's demographics are being so rapidly changed. So I propose in today's episode to have a look at that in a legal fashion. We'll look at it the way cases are argued in court, where first you look at the facts of the situation. We'll review some of the statistics from the Government of Canada or as our starting point for how Canada is changing. Then we'll look at the law, what the international laws define ethnic cleansing and genocide as, and then we'll see, does it apply? And how do these laws apply? Do they meet the factual situation that we see on the ground in Canada? I'm not going to spoil it for you of that last section. Let's just go straight into the facts. So I've got Statistics Canada webpage open here. Link is in the show description. The title of this page is Canada's Population Estimates, Record High Population Growth in 2022. So I think this gives some very interesting numbers. I mean, first of all, the thing that jumps out right here is the quarterly population estimate for Canada. We're almost at 40 million people. I remember it was not that long ago at all that Canada was 30 million. And here, look at this headline here: record high population growth in the year 2022. So we'll just look at the highlights of the first three paragraphs here. Canada's population was estimated 39,556,248 on January 1st, 2023, after a record population growth of 1,050,110 people from January 1st to 2022 to January 1st, 2023. This marks the first 12-month period in Canada's history where population grew by over 1 million people and the highest annual population growth rate of 2.7% on record. Since that seen in 1957, 3.3%. Canada has grown faster in the past, but what's the nature of the growth? 57 was related to a high number of births during the post-war baby boom and a high immigration of refugees following the Hungarian Revolution of 1956. Contrast that with 2022, where the reason behind Canada's record high population growth was different, since international migration accounted for nearly all the growth, 95.9%. Almost 100%, basically 96% of Canada's growth from immigration, not from birth. I mean, basically, Canadians have so few children that the deaths of people every year counteract the births. So it's all immigration. Big difference from the 50s. So we can't really compare to the 50s. So what is the nature of that immigration? I think that's important to look at as well. Got another tab here from Statistics Canada. Again, link in the show description. So here they're just saying, did you know that more than 8.3 million people and almost 1 in 4 people, so we're getting close to 25% of the population, are landed immigrants. So people who were not born in Canada. And they talk about it in the past, majority of immigrants were from Europe. Now the majority come from Asia. So We've got a chart here showing immigration in the past, the percentage or immigrants. You can see there are quite a few during the World War I, World War II periods into the 30s, then it dropped off significantly, and then it's been growing till we're back up now at the highest level ever. At least, look, I mean, in the lifetime of Canada, because look, even 1867 is when Canada came into existence. It was significantly lower then than it is now in terms of people who are born. Now, this shows that, again, I've talked about the changing face of Canada. How is immigration changing? You can see these percentages. So back in the 1800s, 88.4% were from Europe, and then you had immigrants from the United States. I'm assuming maybe that's people who weren't happy with the outcome of the war between the states coming north. And then you can see a progressive growth of the orange and yellow sections and the gray sections on this. You can see the key here. Asia, including the Middle East, we're now 51.4%, 9.9% from Africa. And this chart here gives us the top 10 places for birth of recent immigrants. So this is 2021. Immigrants in 2021, 18.6% of them were from India, 11.4% from the Philippines, 8.9% from China. I've seen other statistics that suggest China has overtaken the Philippines and India has increased its percentage in 2022, but for ease of reference, we'll just stick with what I have here. So in terms of facts, it's unquestionable that in the past, we've always had a number of immigrants, but in the past, Canada's growth was much more as a result of births and as a result of immigrants from Europe. So Canada had a particular mixture, a particular demographic in the past. That's just the fact. You may think that that's bad, you may think that's good, and you may think it's indifferent. It doesn't change whether it's a fact or not that that's what Canada's demographic makeup in the past was. That's what Canada's bulk of immigration was in the past. Now we look today, it's a completely different composition. Again, good, bad, or indifferent, it's unquestionable that the composition is different. The composition of Canada is changing when almost a quarter of the population weren't born in Canada, and those immigrants are from different places than they were in the past. Not from Canada, obviously, because they're immigrants. Things are changing, and they're changing at a rapid rate, and it's ramping up more all the time. In a previous episode, I'm sure my volunteer PR guy, he'll give you a nice link somewhere on the screen here, because I didn't think ahead to look it up before filming this episode, but you may recall I recently looked at immigration statistics for last year. They're talking about very similar numbers to what we saw here. Hundreds of thousands of new people being granted permanent resident status, but then of course there's that again and more of people here on student visas or work visas. I mean, those are people who are staying here permanently. That's about 500,000. You've got about another million between work visas, visiting family, people on visitor visas. So about 1.5 million new people coming into the country. There's been talk of ramping that up to 2 million. They want to keep ramping it up more. You can find that rhetoric in those commentary from our government officials. So those are the facts. Things are changing quickly. Now let's look at the law surrounding ethnic cleansing and genocide, because that's what I was asked about. You know, these are highly charged terms, but let's look at them before we jump to conclusions, and then we'll see, does it apply, does it not apply? So, first link we're looking at, again, all links in the show description, from the European Commission. What do they define as ethnic cleansing? The definition of ethnic cleansing, according to the European Commission, is rendering an area ethnically homogeneous by using force or intimidation to remove from a given area persons of another ethnic or religious group, which is contrary to international law. Doctors Without Borders, they have a page on this as well. They reference the fact that this mostly references what went on in the former Yugoslavia. And then they talk here saying, in times of conflict, the acts of violence that make up the practice of ethnic cleansing are war crimes. For instance, international humanitarian law prohibits methods of warfare whose primary purpose is to spread terror among the civilian population and forced displacement of populations and deportation. And the focus seems to be the use of violence. So that's the definitions of ethnic cleansing. We'll look quickly at genocide to see what the definition is there. We hear lots of reference to cultural genocide. I think it can be fairly said that a cultural genocide was perpetrated on First Nations people to an extent. It wasn't complete. They still have aspects of their culture remaining, and they still exist in Canada. But it's worth looking at because the genocide of a way of being, of a heritage, religion, culture, is that occurring? And we've looked at some various aspects of that. But again, we're looking at the law right now. The Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, this is on this UN website here, Article 3 of that convention says that in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Again, I've made reference to First Nations. That would be the forcible transferring of children of the group to another group. Residential schools would come to mind with that. So we have these definitions before us. Do they apply to the situation in Canada? I don't think they do. I think it's fairly clear that ethnic cleansing, the definitions we saw, refer to the use of violence and, importantly, the reference to trying to make a homogeneous area. That is certainly not the case in Canada. We can see from the graphs that we looked at, there is still a significant variety of people coming into Canada. So even if the current population of Canada were 100% replaced by a mix of the immigrants that are being brought in, key word there is it's that mix. There's people from Africa, there's people from various countries in Asia, even the largest group from India. I think they're up to a third on one of the charts I looked at, not the one we looked at here. I think it was about 20%. So we don't have that homogeneity. So we don't have the violence. People might argue there's been some violence, but really there's no removal of people from Canada, aside from Canadians removing themselves by not having children maybe, but that's another argument. Bottom line is we don't have that intent of homogeneity. The genocide definition is a little broader and a little bit more interesting in looking, can that apply? Now, if we're looking just simply at the immigration policies, that alone is not going to rise to that test, because the mere fact of bringing in a number of immigrants, that doesn't mean deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Now, that may be involved in some other things. We've talked about 15-minute cities. We talk about trying to make gasoline-powered motor vehicles illegal, keeping people in a country like Canada where we have winter and EV batteries won't work. You won't be able to travel. Do you combine all these things? Is it calculated to bring about physical destruction, whole or in part, of the people living in Canada? I think that is unproven. I think there's a lot of factors in play. It would be a massive undertaking to look into it further. I think for our purposes, we'd say that doesn't meet with what we see now. And imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Some people might try and argue that by the degradation of the quality of life in Canada, but I would suggest that if you're a parent, you'd probably agree with me that we're not there with that. Yes, it's very difficult to raise children in Canada today, but it's not... I mean, it's such a complex issue, but I mean, there's still very generous universal child tax benefit that everyone gets for each child. It's fairly generous. I mean, it's even for a lawyer like me, it's several $100s per child, and then if you have lower income, you're getting even more. Yes, the tax system is punitive to punish people for having only one income, because you can't do income splitting, so you're going to bring home more money if you have two parents working at $50,000 a year versus one parent working $100,000. You're going to pay way more taxes, even though the household's still bringing in the same. But all that said, you kind of balance it all out, and I don't think any of those definitions apply. But it's interesting to look at and consider. A lot of this terminology gets thrown around, some rhetoric gets thrown around, and I think we need to be careful with the words we use, and to suggest that there's an ethnic cleansing or a genocide going on would respectfully be going too far, but we can certainly see that things are changing a lot in Canada, and they're changing in many ways through how the law is applied. Immigration law is one aspect of Canadian law. We've looked at many others. It's a lot of what this channel is about, and will be as we continue into the future. This video, of course, is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, contact a lawyer. You can call another lawyer, or you can call myself. My contact information is listed below. This episode was based on a question I received from a viewer. Please keep the suggestions coming. We're always looking for ideas. Send an email to the email address listed below, or leave a comment in the comment section. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and remember to hit that little bell on YouTube to make sure you get notifications when new episodes are released.